All of the Olympic teams have been named and competition starts in just over 2 weeks. For those new here, I'm Kensley, the host of Neutral Deductions, a podcast all about men's gymnastics. This is episode 39, where I discuss the best teams with the chances to medal.
This is the Neutral Deductions podcast, men's gymnastic news, coverage, and analysis.
I cannot believe the Olympics are so close. It really is like Gym Nerd Christmas. And so to help everyone prepare, I'm going to do previews of the different finals. So be prepared for several podcasts over the next 2 weeks. As a reminder, I will be working with NBC at the Olympic Games alongside Lori Hernandez and Justin Spring, and I will be unable to update Neutral Deductions during my contract. But don't worry, there is an amazing team of volunteers who will be bringing you podcasts and articles and social media posts in my absence. You are definitely in good hands. So let's go ahead and dive into the top contenders for the podium in the men's team final. So the opening ceremonies for the 2024 Paris Olympic Games are going to take place in just over 2 weeks on Friday, July 26th. And I think the timing of the opening ceremonies is really unfortunate for the men's gymnast because the men's gymnastics qualifying is the day after on Saturday. And so basically most, if not all of these athletes are not going to take place in this amazing opening ceremonies that's going to happen along the Seine River. But in qualifying, we do expect Japan, China, USA, Ukraine, and Great Britain to not only move on to team finals without issue, but also to contend for team medals. So for the men, the top contenders are going to be competing within the first two subdivisions. So the first subdivision will feature USA and Great Britain alongside Germany and Canada. And then in subdivision 2, the final 3 that I'm going to talk about today, People's Republic of China, Japan, and Ukraine. And then of course the Netherlands is also in that second subdivision. So for the fight for gold, I think realistically looking at the D scores and the anticipated team lineups, probably only Japan and China are realistically in this fight for gold. Of course, anything can happen, but with Russia not being there at the Olympic Games, I think China and Japan are the clear favorites. And of those two, I personally would pick Japan to win the team title. They're led by Hashimoto Daiki, who comes into the competition not only as the reigning world all-around champion, but also as the reigning Olympic all-around champion. And him, as well as his teammates, are bringing the most difficulty of any team. So the Japanese team is returning 3 of the 4 2020 Olympic team members. So remember in 2020, they had that weird format where it was only 4-person teams, but you could qualify up to 2 individuals. So returning are Hashimoto Daiki, Kaya Kazuma, and Tanegawa Wataru. And they're going to be joined by 2 newcomers, so Oka Shinosuke and Sugino Takaki. Oka has been part of a major senior international team, so he was part of the Asian Championships team last year, and he actually won the all-around at that competition. But this is going to be Sugino Takaki's first major assignment. And Japan has made it incredibly clear that their goal is to return to the top of the Olympic podium. So they haven't won gold since 2016, and they have brought huge upgrades to do so. So last year at the World Championships in 2023, they competed with a difficulty score of 106.5, and this year they're projected to bring a 109.6. That's a 3-point increase in just a year. Now, if you go to my website on neutraldeductions.com, I actually have tables listed of who I think is going to compete in team finals, plus their projected D scores. Of course, there's typically some changes, like sometimes they'll downgrade by a 10th or upgrade by a 10th, and there could be some differences, particularly on parallel bars for the Japanese team. So right now I'm projecting that Tanegawa Wataru is going to do parallel bars, but it's certainly possible that that third spot is actually going to go to Hashimoto. So take everything again with a grain of salt. These are educated guesses just based on how the Japanese have utilized their athletes in the past. But this gives a pretty good indication of the type of difficulty that Japan is going to bring. Now, again, the other legitimate contender for gold, in my opinion, are the 2022 World Champions, China. And China have actually not been on the top of the Olympic podium since 2012. And of course, as with many of the teams, they have stated that Olympic gold is their priority. Now, the Chinese team is really interesting. They left off their national all-around champion, Shi Song, at home in favor of a more experienced gymnast, Sun Wei. And Sun Wei, of course, is beloved among many of the gymnastics fans. But this decision is really reminiscent of what China did for the last Olympic cycle, which is they left off their best gymnast. So Zheng Boheng scored and the highest and won their Olympic trial. And he was left off for a more experienced athlete during the 2020 Olympics. And it's a decision that many people believe cost them the gold medal. So it's interesting to sort of see the patterns that China falls into, that they typically value maybe more experience over newer athletes who have more potential in that moment. But aside from that, China is fielding an incredibly strong veteran team. They have 4 returning Olympians, and they have a combined 37 world and Olympic medals, making them the most decorated team in the field. Now, in my opinion, China has actually chosen a team that's slightly more focused on bringing individual golds home, and they have brought a slightly less competitive team than Japan to do so. So China has stated that their priority is to retain that still rings gold medal, and they chose to bring Liu Yang in favor of Lan Qingyu, who is equally as strong on still rings. I mean, maybe Liu Yang scores like a half a tenth to a tenth higher, but Lan Qingyu is a really, really great all-arounder. So they have put their eggs in the basket of Liu Yang, again, to bring a slightly less competitive team. So China is expected to have an anticipated D-score of 108.7, which means they're about a fall away from Japan in difficulty. So from my perspective, the main consideration for China is the health of Zheng Boheng. So he's arguably the best all-arounder in the world, and he had to withdraw from Chinese nationals due to an ongoing injury. Because China brought a 1-event athlete in Liu Yang and then a 3-event athlete in Zhou Jingyuan, they need Zheng Boheng to do the all-around. Their other main all-arounder, Xiao Ruotong, is a little bit fragile, and they honestly are probably not going to want to use him in the all-around during team final if all possible, because they want to save him for the all-around finals. So overall, I would say this is not really a safe team, but it's a team with large potential. And the team they're bringing this year is anticipated to compete almost 4 points more in difficulty than they did last year. Just remember that last year, China actually sent most of their best athletes to compete at Asian Games, which was happening simultaneously as the World Championships, which accounts for the large discrepancy in D-score. Now, for me, I think one of the most interesting stories of the Games is the fight for the bronze team medal. And I think a lot of people are expecting the U.S. to maybe be the favorites for that. But interestingly, when I ran the numbers, it's actually Ukraine that has the higher difficulty score. Now, there is about a 2-point drop-off from China to Ukraine, but Ukraine is still bringing a really strong team. They're returning 3 Olympians in Ilya Kovtun, Igor Radivilov, and Oleg Vernayev. And this is actually the same team that they had at the World Championships last year and at the European Championships earlier this year. So joining these 3 veterans are Nazar Chupirny and Radomir Stelmak. So this Ukrainian team has lots of strong individuals, but they honestly have struggled to come together as a team, lots due to the ongoing war and also interpersonal strife that has been made public. I think that is sort of changing. The teams seem to come together in April at the European Championships, and they won with a score that actually would have won the 2023 World Championships last year. And since then, since the European Championships, they have actually upgraded their difficulty by over a point, and there's still more in the tank, which is unbelievable to say. So Ilya Kovtun here on this document, I have him doing a 6'9" parallel bar routine, but he has shown a 7'0" pretty often, so that could be the routine he uses in team finals. He also showed a 6'4" high bar routine that he debuted in copper. It didn't go incredibly well, but that is potentially an upgrade that we could see. Oleg Vernayev can upgrade pommel horse and parallel bars, so we may see even more difficulty from this team in Paris. Now, that being said, the struggle for this team is that they are a true wild card. they can be incredibly inconsistent as a team. So even though that they have a lot of difficulty, they actually often end up much lower in the rankings than their potential just because they are a little bit inconsistent. My main question will always be, can they successfully compete these upgrades that they have planned? And also, is Ilya Kovtun going to be healthy enough to compete well for this Ukrainian team? The Ukrainian team has not medaled since 2000. And of course, they're searching not only for a chance to return to the Olympic podium, but also I think they really want to show the world that they are still standing despite the ongoing war with Russia. So let's move on to the US. They are about a point in difficulty behind Ukraine, but they are still chosen by many as the favorites for the team bronze medal. They are led by world champion Brody Malone, and this team has a really wide range of high-level difficulty, such as Brody's 6-7 high bar routine, and then they have some lower-level difficulty, but really pristine execution in Paul Judah. Malone is the only returning Olympian, though the other 4 members of the team, Paul Judah, Steven Nedorosik, Frederick Richard, and Asher Hong, are all world medalists and excellent in their own right. I think the strength of this team is that it's pretty well balanced, and they actually have even more difficulty to add. So again, if you go to my website, neutraldeductions.com, and you look at the tables, I'm doing what I think the athletes are going to perform in team finals. So one notable difference is that I put Steven Nedorosik at a 6-2. I think that that's probably what they'll aim for team final, but of course he has a 6-5 routine in the tank that he could do, and if that's consistent, of course they're going to want more difficulty, and he's not the only one who can add more on pommel horse. So Paul Judah can add a 10th to 5-3, Brody Malone can add a 10th and be at 6-1, and so altogether they could add even half a point more just on pommel horse alone. So keep all of that in mind with these projections. Now, the main downfall for this US team is twofold in my opinion. The first is their low difficulty on vault, and vault is the event where we see the highest execution score. So it's one where often doing the higher difficulty vaults really does pay off. And they certainly have the lowest difficulty on this event compared to these top teams who are fielding at least all 5-6 vaults, and several of them have a 6-0 vault and 2 5-6 vaults. So down a little bit here. And then the other, I would say, downfall is Nedorosik's international hit rate. Again, he is a superstar. He can be brilliant on this event. He is world champion. I have said it and I will say it over and over again. I believe that he can be Olympic champion on this event, and I believe that he could walk away from these games as the most decorated American male gymnast. But the fact is that he doesn't have a great history of being consistent on this event. He has a 0% hit rate in international team finals. And of all of the top teams, the US is the only team to utilize a true one event gymnast. So as I mentioned with China, Lu Young typically only competes still rings in the team final, but last year in qualifying, he actually competed 3 events. So this means for the US, if an injury happens in competition, it's really only the other athletes that could pick up and fill in the pieces there. So that's just something to watch. Now, if he hits and is light out, that is going to motivate this team like no other. So the US has finished 5th in each of the last 3 Olympic Games, and they're looking to break that streak by finishing on the podium for the first time since 2008. And I want to just again, put these numbers into perspective, like how tight things are. So Ukraine, I'm projecting at a 106.6, the US at a 105.6, and Great Britain, who I'll get to next, at a 105. So it really isn't out of the question that the US could finish 5th again, even though they are the favorites for the podium. It really is pretty tight there in terms of the difficulty that they are bringing. This US team has not placed on an Olympic podium since 2008, where they won bronze. They are the reigning bronze medalists as a team, and they have since increased difficulty by 1.5 points. And I believe that should they be able to perform solid routines, that they are likely to be on the Olympic medal podium over Ukraine and Great Britain. So rounding out the 5 teams that I really feel are strongly in contention for the podium is the British team. And the British team has been selected under pretty heavy criticism. They are led by 3-time Olympic champion Max Whitlock, who is certainly one of the faces of the Paris Olympic Games. But the problem with this team is there just really isn't a lot of room for error or built-in backup. So Joe Fraser and Jake Jarman are the ones who really can competitively compete all 6 events. Luke Whitehouse, who is the newcomer to the team, can compete all 6 events, but you really don't want to use any of his scores like on pommel horse. But like the aforementioned teams, like the Chinese and the Japanese and the US and Ukraine, the British have certainly upgraded their difficulty, not only from the 2023 World Championships, but also from the 2024 European Championships, largely thanks to their stellar floor lineup. So Olympic newcomers Harry Hepworth and Luke Whitehouse are power gymnasts who will aid the British to the most difficult floor lineup of any of the Olympic teams. The British have the difficulty to be competitive for bronze, but there are so many questions about the status of their gymnasts. So Max Whitlock, their superstar, started the year beautifully with a 15.5 on pommel horse at the British Championships. He had a 6.8D score. It's his main event. He is 2-time Olympic champion. He is multi-time world champion. But then he withdrew from the European Championships with an undisclosed injury. And to my knowledge, he's only competed twice since that event, and his results are really, really strange and really concerning. So remember, I said his difficulty sits around that 6.8, 6.9 area. He only competed a 4.8 difficulty. That's 2 points down. And he got a score of a 12.3 at the British Team Championships, so that's different than the British Championships I mentioned earlier. And then he recently competed at a French meet, a friendly French meet, and he did use a 6.6D score, which is pretty competitive, but he only got a 3.55 execution score for a total score of a 10.150. And this is really, really, really concerning. The question is, what is the status of his injury? Is he going to be able to compete competitively, not only for him to win that 3rd Olympic title, which no one has done on any apparatus, won 3 consecutive Olympic titles, but is he going to be able to contribute for the team? And we just won't know until the games actually start. As I mentioned earlier, the British have the most difficult floor lineup of any team, but it's of absolutely zero use to them if they can't marry the difficulty with the execution. So at that friendly meet that I just mentioned with Max Whitlock, Harry Hepworth and Luke Whitehouse both competed there. And Harry and Luke both have difficulties in the high 6s, like 6.5 area. They scored in the 11s, which is well below that mid 14 to 15 mark that they are capable of. So this team has a lot of potential. Again, they're not that far behind the US in terms of total difficulty score, but there really is hardly any room for error or injury. And it's a little bit concerning. It's sort of like, we're standing on the edge holding our breath. Are they going to be able to put these routines together? But should this team reach the podium, it will be the 3rd time the British men's team has reached the Olympic podium. Now, we have gotten so many more 5-star reviews. Thank you so much to those taking the time to write these on Apple Podcasts. So KBW99 said, "Great show. Kensley is the best. She knows all of the relevant facts and information and rules and can explain them in mostly layman's terms. She is so thorough in her reporting and makes men's gymnastics so interesting. I miss her on Gymnastics, but was so happy to see she started this. Also, go blue. Go blue." Interesting and fun fact, this is a total aside, but there are actually going to be 12 to 13 men's gymnastics alum associates from Michigan who are going to be credentialed at the Olympic Games for gymnastics. It's so crazy. It's amazing. It's everyone from Lili Leung, the president and CEO of USA Gymnastics, to many of the coaches, Shao and Jordan, and then of course the athletes, Frederick and Paul and Kevin and Lace, and there's people from the medical staff. There's 2 people from media, so Scott Bregman at the Olympic Channel, and then I'm going to be credentialed. I was the manager for the men's team. So just an incredible, amazing contingent of Michigan alums going to be represented at the Olympic Games. So If you would please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast. It helps others find Neutral Deductions and learn more about men's gymnastics. If you would please like and subscribe if you are listening on YouTube, it really, really helps us out. If you would like to help bring more live men's gymnastics coverage, please consider donating. A massive thank you to Catherine, Nicholas, Robin, and Patricia who donated in the last week. We are entirely listener supported at this point, and even $10 helps us cover a meal. The PayPal link is in every show note and at the bottom of every article on neutraldeductions.com. You can donate via PayPal or Stripe. If you have any questions, comments, or insider tips, you can email us at neutraldeductions@gmail.com. That's all for this week. We'll see you next time.